live, I know. Yes, sorry. So two different people live here, two different kinds of people. We have Jews and Arabs living in Israel. At the beginning, obviously, more Arabs than Jews, and then slowly, more and more Jews started to move to Israel, make aliyah from all around the world, mostly Europe, but also other places. How do the Arab people feel about it who lives in Palestine? So at the beginning, they don't really mind, but slowly they start to understand that if more and more Jews will move to Palestine, then it will become Israel and not Palestine. So they're not very happy about it. And basically, that's kind of the beginning of the conflict officially. What does it mean? It means that they start things like attacking Jewish areas, either in cities or the small settlements, I guess, kibbutzim and moshavim. And they speak to the Brits, to the people who control the land, and they basically ask them to somehow stop all these Jews from coming to. Wow, thank you everyone, whoever who drew that on the screen. It's beautiful. Anyway, so they ask the Brits to help them and basically limit the people who make aliyah and move to Israel. The Brits kind of agree and they don't want to cause any more trouble. So what they do is they take out this white paper to basically limit the number of Jews who can make aliyah and move to Palestine. So what do the Jews feel about it? Obviously, they're not very excited. So they try and fight it. And the way they do it, why doesn't it work? It does. They open this underground organizations, so obviously illegal, and try and fight all of these things. So what do? They do three main things. One is they protect the Jewish settlements from the attacks from the Arabs around them. The second thing that they do is they help Jews come to Israel, to Palestine from all over the world and get there safely, even though it's illegal by the Brits. And the last thing is they open and start building new settlements, new kibbutzim and moshavim, and they make cities grow, and they work really hard to make it happen. Now, obviously, the Arab population is even more angry about it and unhappy, and the conflicts increase and increases. So the Brits getting really annoyed. They did not think it was going to take that long to do something with the people who live there. So they approached the UN and asked them to find somehow a solution and make a decision about who should be controlling the state. The UN sends a special committee to Palestine, and you can see on the map, I think you can see, this is what they recommend that will happen. This is the division. Obviously, the blue part is the Jewish part, and the red is the Arab one. And Jerusalem should be international with a UN control over it. And everyone waits for the vote, and obviously it passes in quite a big majority. And think about what it means for the Jewish people, for the people who live in Palestine. This is the first time in 2,000 years that basically there's a recognition from all around the world that Jews should have a state, and they can see this option of something really happening. So very exciting, a lot of very, very good things. This is happening, I didn't say before, in 1947. I don't know if you saw, there's a timeline at the bottom. I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but just I feel like it will help some people seeing when things happened. So yeah, 1947, the Brits are getting ready to leave Palestine and go back home. And now both the Jews who live in Palestine and the Arabs need to decide what we're going to do from now on. How are we going to deal with this new situation that no one really knows what to do with? In 5th of May 1948, the Brits officially leave Palestine. And David Ben-Gurion, the official leader of the people of Israel, I guess, decides that this is a really important timing, because if we won't declare a state now, it might never happen again. So even though no one really knows what it means and no one really sure what's going to happen at the moment that we're going to declare on a state, they make a decision and do it. And on Friday afternoon, 5th of May 1948, they meet in Tel Aviv, not Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is not under the control of the Jewish people, obviously, at this time. And basically tell the world that this is it. We're a country now. We're Israel, and this is what happened. And now Israelis are very, very happy about it. You can see from the picture the joy and the happiness and the dancing that is happening on the streets outside of this hall in Tel Aviv. Everyone's really happy. But there's a big but. There are other consequences to that. Beside of the fact that it's very exciting and happy, there's also an understanding that at this point, basically, a war is starting. And that's basically when the independence war starts. So basically, Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia all invade Israel at the same time on this day. And think about it, Israel doesn't have an army. It basically just started. We don't even have a state, really. And it's really complicated. What are we doing now? Who's fighting these people who just invaded us? Egypt and Syria and Jordan actually also had some of the strongest armies in the world at this time. Very powerful and very scary. And the people in Israel understand that they're fighting for their lives, literally. If they're going to lose this war, they're all going to die or go back to wherever they were, but they're definitely not going to have a state. So it means basically that everyone is taking part in the war, not just soldiers, not that there are real soldiers, but because remember the underground organizations that we were talking about them before, they're basically the soldiers that we have, right? They're not really trained, they don't have real weapons, not money, not real uniforms. They like kind of get it happen from scratch, and they make an army out of nothing. There's a really famous story about a young boy called Nissim Gini. He was 9 years old when the war started. He lived in Jerusalem with his family in the old city. And he decided he's going to take part in the fighting. So he started taking messages from one headquarter to another, from one bunker to the other. And he was killed during this running around between these houses. And he's basically the youngest soldier who was killed in the IDF. Even though the IDF wasn't really happening at this time, he was recognized as a soldier, even has a number, and you can see it when you go to Mount Herzl. And I think it really represents this feeling of everyone has to take part in fighting, because if not, we'll just die, we'll just stop existing. And that's kind of the feeling that there is in Israel. When the war ends, after almost a year and a half, a year and 2 months, 6,000 Jews, 6,000 Israelis are being killed, are dying in the war. At this time, there were 60,000 Jews living in Israel. Now think about it, it's 10% of the population of a new country is dying in a war. On the first war, it influenced so much about what happened after. I think it really reflects on what's happening afterwards in Israel, this understanding that this is our story, this is what we're doing, we're all part of building this country, of starting something from nothing, and we're going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. And then the war ends, and now we need to start, building a country without this risk from the outside countries. We need to start, building economy and building houses and building roads, because there is nothing. And there's these Jews coming from all around the world, from Europe a lot, right, after the Holocaust, but also from Africa and all the Arab states. All of a sudden, there's a Jewish state. Of course, we want to move there. We're going to give everything we have and just go and move there. So a lot of Jews making Aliyah at this point. And, well, what are we doing with them? We don't have enough houses. We don't have roads. We don't have enough settlements, cities. What are we going to do with these people? We don't even have enough jobs, right? Because what are we going to do with all these people? We don't need them, really. If all of them creating, I don't know, jewelries, we don't need jewelries now, right? It's irrelevant. We need houses. So the government starts this time that basically they declare on a very special economical state, which, if I'm not mistaken, is called austerity period. Thank you, Josh. And they basically give each person amount of food that they can get. Each person gets like a small booklet of like papers that says, okay, this day you can have this many eggs, this day you can have this many I don't know, bottles of milk and things like that, depending on how many people you have in your family, in your house. And this is how they live for a few years. Very, like, think about it, it's insane. This new country who starts with basically, they don't have enough food to give all the people. So it's a very special time. And then in terms of houses, what are we doing with them? So there's this new concept, I guess, that is called ma'abarot or ma'abara in one. It's this small, like settlements that is built mostly from like tents or really poor houses, and they just take the people who make Aliyah to Israel and put them on coaches and drive them to the middle of nowhere and just basically leave them there. Because what can you do? Where are you going to put them? You don't have the houses. Afterwards, there's been a lot of criticism about this, that they were saying this is actually a discrimination and you're being racist by doing it, because most of these people that were put in coaches and drove into the Ma'abarot were not Ashkenazi Jews, they were Mizrahi Jews and Sephardic Jews. And that became a very big thing later when we talk about like processes that happen in the Israeli society. But yeah, that takes some time, and we build a country and we build an economy, some sort of something. It's a lot more like socialist than it is today. Yeah, and then Israel starts to look at other places as well. And one of its missions is, after the Holocaust and understanding a bit of what happened there, to try and find the Nazis and helpers and bring them to justice, bring them to court, and yeah. And a very famous story, and maybe something that really changed the way people in the world, and especially in Israel, looked at the Holocaust, was the Eichmann trial. The Mossad basically sent a task force into Argentina to get, because they realized that Eichmann, he was basically an officer in the Nazi army that was in charge of making the final solution happen. So he basically planned and made happen all the camps as we know them and things like that. But he was a very high-ranked officer there. And he was caught and basically kidnapped to Israel and was standing trial. And in his trial, something really special happened. Until then, testimonies of Holocaust survivors were not something that people heard. There was no space to it in Israeli society. No one wanted to listen to it so much. And that was the first time that these testimonies arrived to um, that was the time that basically people in Israel changed their mind about what happened in the Holocaust, because until then, people saw it as, why did you let them kill you? Why did you let them send you into camps? Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you do more than what you've done? Why didn't you save other people who were killed? And basically that's when people around the world understand a lot more about what happened in the Holocaust. So there's like a concept of people in Israel sitting next to the radio and listening to the trial, to everything that happened there, with like real shock, and something that really changed the perception of how people saw the Holocaust. And then afterwards was obviously the Remembrance Day for the Holocaust in Israel decided, and all of that. The other side of it is how people in the world see Israel, and especially the Mossad. The Mossad planned a really, really sophisticated, dangerous operation to get Eichmann all the way to Israel. And that's when people start seeing Israel as some kind of like action heroes or something like that, which we're going to talk about a little more in a minute. So that's when something starts happening, something starts changing. Sorry, I'm rushing. I feel like we don't have time, but if you have questions, feel free to stop me. The next thing we're going to talk about is 1967, the 6 Days War. Obviously something that defines so much about Israel in everyone's eyes, right, in the world and within us. So basically, before the war started, a lot of people in Israel were very scared. Egypt kept saying that we're going to get our pride back after losing in 1948 war. Now we're going to win you back. Now we're going to do better, and we're going to do well, and conquer everyone and kill all of the Israelis who are sitting there, the Zionists. So people in Israel are scared, and then they're so scared that, I don't know if you know the Yarkon Park in Tel Aviv and Gan Saker in Jerusalem, they basically prepare it into cemeteries, massive cemeteries, and you know how big these parks are, because they think everyone is going to die and we're going to need this land to bury all the bodies from the war that is going to happen. But the IDF surprises a lot of people, and basically the really clever operation of destroying most of the air force in Egypt and Syria, they start with like a really big advantage. And within 6 days, Israel basically triples its size, and you can see it on the map. The green part was what Israel used to be before the war, and everything else is basically what happened after the war, what we looks like. Now, one of the great leaders of Israel after was the chief of staff in the IDF, was Yitzhak Rabin, and he's considered as one of the most heroic commanders in the IDF that later became a politician. And in a lot of people's minds, he was the symbol of this Israeli-born commander, soldier, who was like really amazing and did really well in the war and led the country to this great victory. So again, if we were talking about how the world see Israel at this time, this is amazing. Think about it, this tiny country with this tiny army triples its size and not only that, they conquer some of the land of the most powerful armies definitely in the Middle East. But then the war ends, and what does it mean? What are we doing with all this land? This land is not just a land, it's not empty, there are people living there. What are we doing with them? What's their status? Both like legally, who's responsible for them, but also morally, what are we doing with these people? So we basically do nothing, and I think Israel kind of is in a state of, we're so happy and so grateful for this amazing victory, and we say, yeah, now we basically, we run the world. No one's going to mess with us now. We're so strong and powerful. Look what we've done. That we don't need to think about consequences so much. And we start building settlements in these places. Depends on who you ask. Some people would say it was in support of the government, and actually the government tried making it happen. And some people would say, no, it's actually only this right-wing organizations that starts making it happen. But basically, that's what starts happening. And for 6 years, Israel lives, the people of Israel think we are so amazing that really no one is going to mess with us and nothing is going to happen. So not only we don't think about what we're going to do, we don't even fix the cars that were ruined in the war. We don't train our people anymore because we think we're so scary. Nobody's going to try and mess with us now. And that is why when we come to 73, it's Yom Kippur, 1973, so October 1973. And I don't know if any of you have been in Yom Kippur in Israel, but it's a very special atmosphere, right? Everyone's wearing white and going to shul or just walking around. No cars in the streets, no one's going to work. It's really, really special. And in the middle of this day, all in a sudden, a massive surprise war, basically. Egypt and Syria invade Israel, and all in a sudden, Israel doesn't know what to do with itself. So there's sirens going on all around the country, making phone calls to get all the soldiers back to the bases and all the reserve soldiers to the places that they're needed. And there's this massive chaos, and no one is really knowing what's going on. And when these soldiers are going from shul to the base to get uniform and guns and things like that, they realize that there's nothing to use, no weapons, no armored cars, nothing. They need to try and fix everything on the spot and make something happen. And that's one of the biggest criticism that Israel got, both the government and the IDF leaders. So the war takes, I think, 3 months, something like that. Really difficult war. In terms of resolutions, of results, nothing has changed so much. But we basically stay with the same territory, the same size of country, but there's so much criticism about the way things were led. So Josh was asking me, what does Kahalani means? Kahalani is the name of a guy, a commander in the IDF. He was in the Shirion, artillery, and he was basically leading this unit of 5 or 6 tanks that were getting into Syria and trying to defeat the Syrians from coming into Israel. And most of its people died in the tanks, and it was this amazing, horrible fight. It was basically a massive hero, and he got a lot of recognition for it. It was such a horrible battle that he made happen, he made work. So yeah, this is the Kahalani story. I recommend strongly to look into it after, because it's a really interesting pattern. There's a lot of stories and videos about it online. Yes, the war ends with a lot of dead soldiers. 2,222 Israelis get killed in the war. That's a lot. Not only that, there's some horrible stories of places like Bet Hashita, which is a small kibbutz in the north, that there were a lot of its sons were in the same unit in the army, and they were all killed. Think about the effects of these things on the small kibbutz that has I think 15 of its sons dying in war, all within few weeks. Really horrible time in Israel, and people are being really upset about it. People are criticizing the government strongly and criticizing the IDF leaders strongly. And that's the feeling that is happening in Israel at the time. Sorry, I saw Jenny sent me a question that I don't understand. If you want to explain your question better, maybe, because, yeah, and then I'll try and answer it. I'm going to
Wait, can you hear me?
Can I hear you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, clearly. I was just you know how you were saying for those 6 years, they were like, they thought, oh, they were so powerful, they didn't think other people would attack them. Was it still compulsory to join the army?
So yes, it was, but the training wasn't very good, and people were not getting ready to being attacked because they didn't think anything would happen. So they basically said, yeah, we have to do it. We'll see what happens in the future. No one really thought we need to cancel it, but yeah, it was still mandatory, but not very good. So a lot of the soldiers were not trained when the war actually started.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, moving on. So between 73 and 77, as I said, a lot of criticism on the government. The government until 77, since 48 to 77, almost 30 years, is in control of the Labour Party, basically, what we call the Labour Party today. It's a bit different then. Nothing has changed, you know, it was the party that David Ben-Gurion established, right? One of the, maybe the greatest leader of Israel. And I think after this, the war, people started criticizing the government a lot more than they used to before. Not only that, new voices started coming up about, and if you remember before when we were talking about the Ma'abarot of the Mizrahi Jews, Mizrahi Israelis who came from other places to Israel and were being treated very poorly, all of a sudden they start, you know, saying what they had. They start saying, wait, this is not okay. We're Israelis just as much as you. We deserve the same rights. We don't deserve this treating the way you've been acting towards us, and you need to change it. And there's massive riots, mostly in Haifa and in Tel Aviv. And then there's elections in 1977, and there's a revolution. All in a sudden, Menachem Begin, who was the right-wing politician, again, he was also one of the greatest leaders of Israel, but before that, he was being considered as something very radical, very crazy, even a terrorist in a way, because of the things he's done before Israel was established towards like the Brits and Arabs and things like that. And all in a sudden, he wins the elections and no one understands that this is happening. There's a very famous video of the news reporter. He's like sitting there waiting for results, and then he's reading it from the paper, and he's so shocked that he can't really say it properly. And he's like, Mahapach, revolution. People in Israel did not believe that this could happen. And then when it did, a lot of things really changed, because after 30 years of a left-wing socialist parties in control, all of a sudden a right-wing party is taking over. And one of the things that, I'll say about two things that happened during the time that he was prime minister. One of them was a lot of support in settlements, right, in building settlements in the West Bank and in Gaza and in Sinai and the Golan Heights. And the other thing, which was really special, was the peace with Egypt. I don't know if you remember, but until now, we were talking about how Egypt basically hated Israel, and it was one of the biggest and most difficult enemy that Israel had. And only in a sudden, Menachem Begin, the right-wing politician, is bringing peace with Egypt, which is the biggest enemy that Israel has. Something really special, something that people did not believe could happen until it did. We get into 1982. We were talking a lot about the West Bank and about Egypt and Gaza and Sinai. We're going to go back to it later, but we didn't speak about Lebanon. I don't know if you know, but Lebanon is a very, very complicated country. It's basically a mix of a lot of different cultures and different people who were brought up. Basically, it was decided for them that now they're a country, now they're a state and they're a nation. But it was very unnatural and they were very conflicted within themselves. And for many years, a lot of conflicts were happening there. Because it was such a weak and, I don't know, complicated country and government, it was very easy for the Palestinian refugees and the Palestinian terror organizations. It was like amazing for them there because they had freedom. All of South Lebanon was basically under their control, and they had money and they had support, and it was really great for them there. So basically, they were standing in South Lebanon, and they came into Israel, places like, I don't know, they came in through the north of Israel and had a lot of terror attacks during these years. I'm talking between, I would say, something like since the 70s all the way till 82. And then Israel decides to invade Lebanon and bring peace to the people of the north of Israel. And when they do, they kind of don't know where to stop. If the goal of the operation was to bring peace to the people of Israel, then probably, I don't know, few kilometers into the border would be, strong enough. They would have control enough over the area. But they didn't stop, and they made it all the way to Beirut, which is the capital city of Lebanon, which is very far away from Israel, right? It's almost as far as Tel Aviv is far from the northern border. So it's like really, really distant, and they go all the way because Israel does obviously have a very strong army, and we managed to take it all the way with some really, great stories about heroism. One of the most famous one is the Beaufort, which is massive, really old fort in one of the biggest mountains in South Lebanon. That basically from there you control all of South Lebanon because it's so high. And then the Special Forces of Golani Brigade, they have a plan, an operation plan of how to conquer it, and they do in a very heroic battle, and they get the PLO, the Palestinian organization who control this area, to lose. With that in mind, obviously a lot of fallen soldiers, because it's a very difficult battles, and it's different culture, I guess, of fighting, because it's in villages, in houses, which is something that Israel is not very used to, this kind of fighting. Israel stays in Lebanon until 2000, right? For 18 years, Israel controlled South Lebanon. Obviously, we didn't control all the way to Beirut. We slowly moved back and controlled only the most southern part of Lebanon. But think about it, for 18 years, Israel basically controlled this land. It's a lot of time. One of the most famous stories, and maybe the most difficult one, is about Sabra and Shatila, who were both two Palestinian refugee camps in South Lebanon that had a lot of headquarters of terror organizations there. No, the IDF was working in cooperation with the Christian Lebanese people, which became later the Army of South Lebanon. And they were working together, and Israel gave a command, I guess, to these Christians to go and take over these refugee camps and take out all the terrorists from them. It's unclear if Israel knew or not at the time that it was happening, But these soldiers basically walked into these camps and killed everyone, basically. They killed the terrorists, right? But they also killed a lot of other people. And it depends on who you ask. It's unclear how many people were killed, murdered in these attacks, but it's between the lowest numbers is 340 and the highest one is 3,500. So it's really unclear because they're refugees, so it's unclear how many people are actually living there. Very, very, very difficult situation, obviously. Understanding that people basically under our responsibility doing something so horrible when we call ourselves the most moral army in the world, how can it be? How could we let something like that happen? So obviously the IDF gets a lot of criticism for it, both from like outsiders, right? All of Europe and America are very angry about this situation, but also inside, people in Israel are saying, wait, how could this happen? This is not something that we know that the IDF can even get involved with. What is going on? How did we let this happen? And that leads us to a very interesting process of people in Israel criticizing the IDF and asking or demanding the IDF to get out of Lebanon. A very famous organization is the Four Mothers. It was four mothers of soldiers that were serving in Lebanon. Now think about it, for 18 years, people served in Lebanon. Think how many soldiers were recruited to the army, got out, and we were still in Lebanon. Like think about it, so much. Now these mothers were saying, wait, we understand that we need to defend the people of Israel. We are the people of Israel, right? We have the right to live in peace. The way is not right. We can't do it this way. We need to find a better way to make it happen. And slowly, so at the beginning, they get a lot of criticism and people are saying, why are you betraying your country? Why are you not supporting? In times like this, you have to support your people or something like that. But slowly, they get a lot of support until in 2000, there's elections again, and Ehud Barak becomes the prime minister of Israel. Now, he gets elected mostly because he's saying, I'm going to get out of Lebanon, definitely. So then when he gets elected, he decides that he's going to pull out all of the IDF forces from Lebanon, and he does. That also brings a lot of criticism, obviously, because that's what we're good at. But people are saying, wait, you can't just leave and disappear. Like, this is not a way to do it. Who's going to protect us now when you're out of Lebanon? And really, 6 years after, there's another war in Lebanon, but we're going to talk about it in a minute. I promise there's not much. You can see we're in 82, so there's not much left. We're good. Okay. When we talk about the West Bank, what does that mean? So you can see on the map the territory where the West Bank is. We're talking about basically the area that is northern and southern than Jerusalem. That was obviously until 67 in control of Jordan. And now, 67, Israel took over it. And what, as I said, what are we doing with these people? Nothing. We do nothing. We leave them as they are. And these people are mostly refugees, mostly people who don't have citizenship, not a Jordanian one, obviously not a Palestinian one, but now also not an Israeli one. And they take it and take it and take it, and it slowly, Israel starts building settlements and nice roads to these settlements and nice houses in these settlements of these Israeli people who live there. And they say, wait, but like, what about us? Why don't we deserve anything? Not only we don't have independence as Palestinians, we're not even being taken care of. We don't see a future. We don't have jobs. We can't work anywhere. Our kids will never have good jobs and will never have good lives. And we don't see a good future for them. And that's one of the reasons that lead to the Intifada. Intifada, the word, means uprising in Arabic. And the first Intifada starts happening in 93, even though some riots started happening before that. It wasn't very organized. It wasn't very sophisticated. It was mostly like protests who turned into riots, who turned into violent riots. And when I say violent riots, I mean mostly throwing stones or maybe, Molotov cocktails, things like that, which is not nice and not great, but not what we imagine when we talk about terror attacks in Israel. But these protests, these riots, make the world put a lot of pressure on Israel and the Palestinians to find some sort of solution to this problem, to find some sort of understanding about what we want in this country. And after very secretive negotiations, in 1995, Israel signs the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of what it is, because that's why we have another webinar in a few weeks. But I will say that the main things about it was a mutual recognition of each other's rights to exist and live where we are, a division of the territory for territories that goes to the Palestinian authorities and territories that belong to Israel, only in the West Bank we're talking about, and the understanding that basically Palestinians need to have some sort of police or like a power over its people, right? Because what does that mean? That the authority and they have people over its power, over its people, if they don't even have, weapons to control them. What do we think? What do the people of Israel think about this agreement? So I would say it's definitely very much divided. I don't know if half and half, but I can say both of the sides were very extreme in their opinion. They had a lot of feelings about it and thoughts and ideas. One side said, "Oh my God, this is so amazing! Finally, peace after so many years. We see hope. We see a future. We see something for our kids, some sort of a good environment in the state of Israel with the Palestinians." When the other side said, wait, are we signing a peace process, a peace contract with Yasser Arafat? He is the greatest terrorist of all time. How can we even do that? And not only signing it, we give him weapons? How does that even make sense? We're giving out lands so they will live there happily. That is not okay with us, and we are not okay with it. And there's massive protests around it. And I think that was one of the lowest points in terms of unity in Israel. Very difficult times. If I'm generalizing it, then I would say one side is left-wing secular people, and the other side is religious right-wing people, obviously with a lot of other people in between, but that's the majority. This is the one of the biggest rifts that Israel has. This comes to basically an explosion in November 95, when Yitzhak Rabin is on stage singing the song for peace in front of a lot of people in what's called Kikar Malchei Israel, and today is being called the Rabin Square in Tel Aviv, a massive peace rally, a lot of people coming there. When he goes down in the stairs, when he leaves the stage, he's being shot 3 times in the back by an Israeli Jewish religious guy who shot and killed him. He was killed like a few minutes after. Big shock for everyone. Huge thing, obviously, as you can imagine. The funeral is a massive event. The most important leaders in the world came for the funeral. You can see in the picture, you can see the King of Jordan and his wife came to the funeral. and also Bill Clinton, the President of the United States. And in his speech, in his eulogy, he's saying a very famous say that said "Shalom Chaver," which is goodbye friend or peace friend, that afterwards became kind of like the I don't know, the say that everyone is saying about the situation, about this political, I don't know, resolution. How does it affect Israel? What happens in Israel then? You can see from this picture, which is basically where the murder happened, the assassination happened. You can see loads of people, loads of young people, coming to this square, lighting candles, crying, singing songs for a few nights after the murder, basically mourning the loss of this great leader. What does it mean now? Who's going to lead this country? Who's going to lead our nation? So there's a decision to go for elections only between the two main parties who leads Israel, the Likud and the Labour. And you can see from the percentage over there that it was very, very close. But basically, the Likud is winning. The right-wing political party in Israel wins with a very known leader, Bibi Netanyahu, becomes the prime minister. Now, as a right-wing politician, you can assume what happened to this understanding with the Palestinian people after the murder. A lot of the things were not cancelled because legally it was very problematic and we couldn't cancel it. But he basically took back a lot of the promises. He made things a lot more slow. He didn't invest a lot of money in this peace process. Yes. So it's year 2000, and until then, there's a lot of terror attacks happening from mostly the West Bank and Gaza to Israel. But the second Intifada starts in 2000, Nakba Day, which is we celebrate today as well. So it starts with a few, again, riots that become a lot more deadly than we knew before. And in 5 years, Israel, I think it's the hardest time in Israel in terms of terrorism. The first one is the attack in the Dolphinarium. I don't know if you know this place, but it's a club on the beach in Tel Aviv. On Saturday night, 21 teenagers get killed in a terror attack. In March 2002, we called it Black March because in the first 27 days of March, there were 23 terror attacks in Israel and 135 civilians were killed. The most famous and difficult one is the terror attack in Park Hotel, which is a hotel in Netanya. It's the evening of Saturday night, evening of Pesach, and the terrorist basically blew himself up in the middle of everyone celebrating Pesach. And that's when Israel decides, that's it, no more. We are not okay with these attacks anymore. And we're going to get rid of the people who are trying to hurt us. And they basically take over the West Bank again, that was given in Oslo Accords to the Palestinian authorities. It's a really difficult operation, very difficult one. The operation didn't really help in terms of stopping the attacks. Even during the operation, IDF is in Ramallah, in Nablus, in Hebron, they still managed to get terrorists out towards Israel. And I don't think you understand the scare that people in Israel have. They fear for their lives. They don't go to malls, they don't take buses, they don't go anywhere because they think they're going to get killed by terrorists. And that's when Israel builds the fence, the separation wall. After they were building a separation wall, in 2004, there's a 45% less terror attacks coming out of the West Bank. So basically, that ends the Intifada. We really don't have time, so I'm going to try and do it real quick. 2005, until then, Israel controlled Gaza as well, that we haven't spoken about much, but Basically, Israeli settlements in Gaza, around 8,000 Jews living there. Very scary, very difficult times, because during the Intifada, things are happening in the West Bank, but they're also getting really scary in Gaza. A lot of attacks towards the Israelis who live in Gaza. That makes the government decide to pull out in an operation called the disengagement, in 2005, summer 2005, Gaza is left with no Israelis in it. Israelis today are not allowed to go into Gaza. In 2006, just a few months after the disengagement, Hamas, who are the terror organization that I'm sure you've heard about, they take power over Gaza and basically the Palestinian authorities, which changes a lot the way that we communicate with. Until then, we were talking with Yasser Arafat in the PLO. They were basically our partners. Now we don't have a partner in Gaza because we don't negotiate with this terror organization. 2006, as I said before, things get heated in Lebanon. 2 soldiers are being kidnapped, and that's why Israel decides to go on a war again in Lebanon. Few weeks, difficult times, very amazing, heroic stories about battling there. One of them is Roy Klein that jumped on a grenade to save its people. And the other one is Michael Levin, which is a new Ole who decided to come back home from a holiday. He visited home in America, decided to come back to fight and was killed in action. Very difficult war. But then a few weeks after, we left Lebanon. Ever since, there's basically quiet times with Lebanon. I'm not going to go into this as well, but Gilad Shalit, I'm sure you know who he was or heard the name in a way. He was a soldier. He was kidnapped by Hamas into Gaza. A lot of protests. FZY took part of a lot of protests. And after more than 5 years in prison, we negotiated and brought him back to Israel. Whew. Really almost done. 2011, there's a massive protest. I'm not going to go into why and how it started, but basically Israelis start saying it's really expensive living in Israel, way more than it should be, and it's not because we need it to be expensive. It shouldn't be as expensive to live in Israel. We pay taxes. The government should make sure that it's not that expensive. And thousands of people come out to the streets, both in Tel Aviv, but also in a lot of other places, and create this amazing cultural change of the people of Israel saying, enough is enough. We are not okay with this, with these prices. I think it creates a new generation of politicians, a lot more socialists that are now still active and doing amazing things. Okay, this is basically the last part. Since the disengagement in 2005 in Gaza, there's kind of like a cycle that's happening with Hamas. It starts by them slowly sending missiles to Israel, shooting at Israel, but not too much. And then usually it gets to a point where for a day or two, they send hundreds of missiles to Israel. And then Israel attacks very strongly, very, difficult attacks towards Gaza. And then it's a war for like a few days. And then there's some sort of negotiation for like quiet times, and it's quiet again for a few weeks, months, something like that. In 2014, things got a lot more scary than usual. There was one of the main reasons is these tunnels, the tunnel attacks that were very scary and were coming from Gaza into Israel, usually in areas that has, like people living in, so settlements, kibbutzim, moshavim, and things like that. So Israel starts with an operation that takes a bit more than a month in Gaza. And I want to tell you just one story about it. You see this beautiful boy that is on the right side of the screen. His name is Daniel Tregerman. He was 3 years old. He was at home with his parents, and they heard the siren, the Tzeva Adom, and they started running toward the shelter. And his parents were getting ready to leave the house and go to their relatives who live in Tel Aviv. But they didn't make it on time, and the direct hit of a missile targeted him basically, and he was killed on the spot. Now think about it, he's 4 years old, sitting there at home, just playing around. You see the Legos that was taken on the day that he was killed. And I think from this moment, the people in the Gaza envelope, in the Gaza area, are saying like different things, I guess, are saying things, seeing things differently, and are saying, wait, no, until now we supported the policies of the government and the policies of the IDF, but this is not okay anymore. Let us live in peace. Let us live peacefully in our land, in our home. And they say to everyone, right? Not specifically to Hamas, but also not only to the government of Israel. And something amazing that happened, this bunch of kids that you can see on the picture in the middle have decided that enough is enough. They were year 13, and they decided to just start walking from home, from Sderot, all the way to the Knesset in Jerusalem. And how do I know these kids? They are my mom's students. My mom's a teacher, and they're her students. And they decided to walk to the Knesset and basically protest and tell everyone, we're not telling you how to resolve the situation. We're not. But we grew up knowing only that, right? It's the year 2018. We're 18. We don't know another reality because the attack starts in 2000. And they're saying enough is enough. And I think that's a very big change in the mindset of people around Gaza. I will tell you that ever since this happened, there were already 2 cycles, again, of like attacks from Gaza towards Gaza and going back and forth. Yeah. Few weeks ago, there were elections in Israel, and Bibi Netanyahu was elected to be the prime minister again, which I think is a big thing. I think people were thinking maybe things will change now, but they didn't. Most of the people actually chosen to keep leading us. I really hope that the next time we're going to talk about Israel's history, it will end with this, right? Because most of what we were talking about were like wars and things like that. And I hope that we're not going to talk about things like that anymore. Maybe if we win Eurovision again, we can talk about it. By the way, vote for us on Saturday night. That was a rush of everything. It was not supposed to give you a very in-depth ideas of Israel history. You're not supposed to know everything. But I want to ask you to keep looking into things. I put here a few of the things that can help giving you some sort of a better understanding of everything we talked about and some more. And I will say I'm happy to send you links for things. Just ask. We have so much information. There's so many interesting and amazing things online, even like videos, not just, read books and things like that. But I would say definitely as leaders on X&Y, you are being expected not to know everything, absolutely not, but to be interested, to learn more, to look for more information about all these things. That's it. I hope you enjoyed it and it was interesting for you. Here for questions, if you have any, for 3 more weeks. And yes, thank you so much for listening for so long.
Thank you, Omer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Omer.
Amazing.
Thanks, Omer. See ya.
Yes, you will. everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.